Welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a step away from network security and we're going to configure the Cisco Network App inside of Splunk. That's more for analytical data and network operations data instead of security per se, but it's pretty easy to configure. From the perspective of Splunk, you pretty much just have to configure the data inputs, but from the network device perspective, you have to configure, send Syslog, and you have the option to also configure things like smart homes specifically towards Splunk. So we'll go ahead and go through that configuration on a couple of our switches, and we'll also configure it on the wireless controller and the router. So let's start out. Let's put our configuration in. So if we wanted to configure Syslog to be sent to Splunk, I'm going to just copy and paste this in here. This is we want to make sure that the service timestamps are there, sequence numbers, your logging level. I'm putting informational, but it can be as whatever you'd like it to be. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not just overloading, every single thing to Splunk, unless you just really need that data. And then logging host, whatever your Splunk IP address is, and the UDP number, port that you'd like to use. If you'd like to do some sort of auditing or archiving for logs, you can also turn on auditing, and that will send the information over to Splunk. You can log interface changes globally. And you can do logging at the interface level, which would be this configuration. And in case I'm going too fast, you can go ahead and pause the video and kind of screenshot this. You can monitor MAC moves, STP logging, IPSLA, NTP, things like that. If you wanted to go to the interface once again, you can configure ARP thresholds on SVIs and physical interfaces. If you have TrustSec configured, you can configure that for logging as well. If you wanted to configure IP ACL logging, you can do so with that command. If you also want to send information in regards to CP and memory utilization, this would be how you would configure it. You can configure, customize this a little bit, but that would be highs, lows, things to alarm on. If you wanted to configure smart home, it's a little bit different. So let's go ahead and put that down. So we start with, let me separate smart home. This part is optional as well, but you can have it configured to send certain information back to Splunk when certain events happen. So let's say, catmac at securitydemo.net. There you go. And you can have the inventory periodically send daily, and you can configure it on whatever HTTP port you wanted to do. This one would be a TCP input. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this mostly into our router and switches, so we're being redundant here and configuring the same thing over and over again by hand. So let's log into our first switch, number 1. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste the first chunk. This is Then I'll go ahead and turn on archiving. Then I'll turn on interface statuses globally. Looks like I don't need that globally. Just put on the interface. So I'm going to go ahead and I think this one is a 48 port. So I'm going to do interface range G1 to 48. And I think I should be able to post this all here. There we go. And I'll also put it on the SVI. Yeah, I don't, looks like ARP was the only one that would go on the SVI in the link status. Let's go ahead and turn on this. Net. Okay, don't need that. Let's go ahead and do Cisco TrustSec and IPACL. And memory utilization. That's fine. And we'll do our service call home. Give it a moment to finish. I'm going to also log into the other devices and make sure that I configure this there too. It's fine. This one's a 24 port switch. I'll just do the range again. Put it on the SVI. The only last two worked last time, so obviously because trunk status doesn't really matter. Put the rest of these on there. Okay, looks like that's good. Do write mem. Once again, we'll copy and paste this into switch 2. I'm also going to configure this on the router. I'm going to just mute while I do this because we've already seen it on here. So obviously for the router, VLAN 100 doesn't really apply, and in the case of some of those commands, they were specific to trunk ports and VLANs, and that wasn't really needed. So let's go ahead and see which interface we should put this on. So this is going to be on the internal interface. So it's going to be IP HTTP client source interface G1. Okay, so that's done. Do write mem. Next up, we'll go ahead and configure this on the actual wireless controller. So let's go over to our WLC. And we also have one AP out there, so we'll configure that as well. So we'll go to Management, Logs, Config, and we'll configure the I'll just go ahead and change this to informational so we get a lot of logs. Not necessarily what you want to do, but yeah, well, in production this isn't advised, but obviously in lab it's not as much. It's not as important. And then from the AP level, you can also configure it for. You can also configure it to send syslog data as well if you have it like set to a static IP address, for example. So let's go over to wireless. I'll SSH over to that AP. .1.100.104. Oh. Actually, if I don't have it turned on for SSH, I can console in. Give me a moment. So it's just really one command. That would be config. Let's see. Oh, it's, you know what? I see what I did wrong. My bad. I have to actually go to the wireless controller and SSH over to that. Let me go ahead and do so right now. So let's create a new session. This is going to be SSHing over to the wireless controller, so 10.100.41. Specify the username. It's going to be admin. Make this bold so it's easier for you guys to see. Click OK. Okay, so there's configure, AP, syslog, host, global, 10.1.100.20, and this tells it to send the syslog data to Splunk. Now again, this is probably not something you necessarily need to do in production, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that you can send there. In reality, if you're sending it from a lot of that syslog data from the wireless controller directly, you won't need to do the AP, but I'm kind of giving you, showing you some different things that can be done. So inside of Splunk, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the TCP and UDP inputs. So you'll want to go to right from the dash page, you go add data and then monitor. And first we're going to create all of our UDP ports. So first one's going to be 514, and we're going to only accept connection from the first switch. And this is going to be, we're going to define this for Cisco iOS. Cisco iOS. Our method is IP. And review, submit. And also, going to add another one. It's going to be from the other switch as well. 514. 100.76. Next. Cisco iOS. IP. So I'm just going to speed this up a little bit and do the router and the wireless controller and AP, and then we'll go to the TCP inputs. Next, we'll add the HTTPS inputs. So those should be fairly easy. So we'll go ahead and go to monitor again. This time it's going to be TCP, and the port that we'll be monitoring was whatever we set that. So in this case it's 847. So we're going to do 847. And I think we just set it up on the router and the two switches. So I'll start with the router and two switches. Oh. Cisco iOS again. And last but not least, the router. Now that we've finished that, we're going to go ahead and check our data inputs that we just entered. So go up to Settings, Data Inputs, and we can just verify that we put it all in correctly. As you can see here, UDP, there's all of those are our switches right there, our switches right here, our router, our AP, and our wireless controller. Go back to data inputs, let's see our TCP ones. Again, showing up, so that's good. So now we can go to the Cisco Networks app that we have installed. There's actually two things that you would install. You first install the add-on for networks, which you can download from the Spunk base, Cisco Networks add-on, and then there's the actual app that has the dashboards. So going back to this, let's go ahead and pull up Cisco Networks and give it a moment. So we see a couple events, severity levels. If I wanted to go ahead and add, so by default it shows iOS. If I want to see WLC and AP, I can go ahead and submit that and see anything coming in from those as well. So top mnemonics, if you want to see the device inventory, anything that we've received Syslog from. So far we've received it from one switch and a wireless controller. It's probably nothing getting on the wireless right now, but let me see if I can trigger something. A wireless guest we can go use. We can also try our switch from switch number 2. We can probably trigger something from just by having somebody log in, or it's connected there. So this is one of my other demo PCs that is connected there. So that 802.1x session should trigger some syslog data. I could also shut down as well, and that probably will bring the port down. Let's take a look. Might take a few moments. Yep, so the second switch showed up. Let me try to jump on the AP and see if anything happens. Might take a moment to load up this. While we're looking at that, we can go look at the interfaces, if there's any syslog relevant to the interfaces themselves. Nothing as of yet, so probably because no ports have actually gone down. So I probably could SSH over to one of those switches and bring the port down. So wonder if, not 100% sure if I disable the port, that'll be good enough, but let's take a look. Show IP interface brief. RT. Oh. Shut. I can bring a port down that it's connected upstream. That would be also a good one. Say 45, 46. Shut, no shut. Well, with that, I have to actually go back into my console. So let me just go ahead and re-enable those ports. There we go. That should bring it back up. And let's take a look, see if we see anything in here quite yet. I believe I put link up and link down. So first we've got a lot more notifications from there. See if we got anything from interfaces. Nothing as of yet. Audit. So we've got that change in place. We can also see any device logins and changes that we made. As you can see here, there's a lot of events that we can see, like spanning tree, Mac flapping, CDP events. Let's see if anything came up for CDP events. Might not be because we're just doing informational. Security, performance. So quite a bit of things that we can kind of look at in this dashboard. Right now we've only enabled it for like a couple minutes, so we're only seeing things from 2 switches and the wireless controller. I just want to see if this is up. Maybe I can try to connect to my AP itself. See if I have a. It would be good if I enabled a an SSID. Enable selected. And let's see if anything shows up. As you can see here, the logs get pretty full pretty quickly. This is just a couple switches in a lab with not a lot of devices out there, so you can see how it can get pretty busy depending on the logging level and what you're doing. Let's see if anything's changed yet. Nothing from the AP itself, but a lot more from getting stuff from the wireless controller. But you know, generally that'll give you that gives you the general idea. So let's see. We've only enabled this for a couple minutes. Let's see if anything is showing up here. So look at how many logs came in. With just we see 3 unique devices, device logins, configuration change, only 1. So a lot of logs can get filled up pretty quickly here. If you're doing something like let's say you're using something like SolarWinds, you might want to prefer that to this, depending on, you know, I think that your license for like the amount of logs with Spunk, with if I recall correctly, SolarWinds is per device, so you kind of have to weigh those benefits of what you're looking for. But you know, this gives you a general idea of some of the cool things that you can do. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and thank you so much for watching this.